I am Joshua, 35 years old, and my own father threw me and my 8-year-old daughter out of Christmas dinner in front of 15 relatives. Before I tell you about how they ended up begging on their knees 5 minutes later, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. I read as many of them as I possibly can. The dining room of my parents' house was suffocatingly warm. The smell of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and fresh pine needles was heavy in the air, creating a sickeningly sweet atmosphere that completely masked the absolute poison sitting around that long mahogany table. My daughter, Lily, was sitting right next to me. She was wearing her best red holiday dress, the one with the little velvet bow that she had picked out specifically for tonight. She was still holding her white linen napkin in her lap, her small hands folded perfectly, just waiting for the roasted potatoes to be passed down the line. She was hungry, she was tired, and she was trying her absolute best to be a good girl for a family that did not even view her as a human being. My father, Robert, stood up slowly at the head of the table. The low murmur of 15 relatives, aunts, uncles, and cousins who had been drinking wine and sharing fake laughter, instantly died down. He did not tap his glass. He did not make a toast. He simply pointed his thick, heavy finger straight toward the front door, like I was a stray dog that had wandered off the street and tracked mud onto his expensive carpets. "Get out," my father said. His voice was loud, booming off the walls and vibrating in my chest. "If you cannot act like family, you do not belong here. You are ruining this evening." I looked down the long table. My older brother Wyatt did not even hesitate. He leaned back in his tall dining chair, crossed his arms over his expensive, custom-tailored silk shirt, and smiled. It was that smug, arrogant smile he always wore when he thought he had one. "Leave and do not come back unless you are ready to do what is right," Wyatt said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You are acting like a child, Joshua. Grow up." I could feel Lily's small hand blindly reach out and tighten around my fingers under the table. She was trembling. Her little knuckles were turning white. Then my mother, Helen, looked straight at me. She did not look at her granddaughter. She did not look at the 8-year-old child who was sitting there terrified. She looked right through me with eyes as cold as the winter snow outside. "This house was better before you," she said flatly, slicing through the remaining silence in the room. "Christmas is better without you. If Emily were still alive, Lily would have a better future. But she is stuck with you." That was the line. She crossed it without a single second thought. 15 people sat at that table. People who shared my blood. People who had watched me grow up. Not a single one of them said a word in my defense. They just stared at their plates or took nervous sips of their drinks. Lily's bottom lip quivered. She looked up at me with wide, terrified eyes, the reflection of the chandelier sparkling in her tears. "Daddy, are we in trouble?" We were not in trouble. They were. I did not argue with them. I did not raise my voice, and I certainly did not beg them to understand. I just looked at my father, the man who supposedly taught me about loyalty and protecting those you love, and I felt absolutely nothing but a cold, hard clarity. "Then you won't mind me doing this," I said. My voice was completely calm. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and pulled out my phone. I placed the phone flat on the table, right next to my untouched plate of food, and hit the speed dial. I tapped the speaker icon. "What are you doing?" Wyatt snapped. His smug smile dropped instantly, replaced by a flash of genuine annoyance. "You do not get to make calls at this table. Get your coat, grab your kid, and get out of our house." I completely ignored him. The phone rang once. It rang twice. The sound echoed loudly in the dead-silent dining room. My father's face turned bright red. The veins in his thick neck were pulsing visibly under his collar. "Joshua, I am warning you right now. I told you to leave." "I am leaving," I said, keeping my eyes locked dead on his. Right after this, the call connected with a soft click. "Adrian," I said clearly into the receiver, making sure the microphone caught every syllable. "We are ready. I am walking up the driveway right now." Adrian's deep, professional, and entirely unbothered voice echoed from the phone speaker. I hung up the phone and slid it back into my pocket. I looked at the large antique grandfather clock standing in the corner of the dining room. The brass pendulum swung back and forth. Tick, tock. It was exactly 6:15 in the evening. 5 minutes. That was all it was going to take to destroy the illusion they had spent a lifetime building. The silence in the room became incredibly suffocating. My Uncle Thomas, a man who had known me since I was a baby, shifted uncomfortably in his wooden seat, staring intensely at his water glass. My cousin Aaron, the man I thought was my closest friend in the family, refused to make eye contact with me, suddenly very interested in the pattern of the tablecloth. "Who on earth is Adrian?" my mother demanded. Her voice had lost a bit of its venom and now carried a slight, nervous tremor. "Joshua, stop playing these childish games. You are upsetting everyone at the table." "I am not playing games," I replied. I picked up my crystal water glass and took a slow, deliberate sip. I wrapped my free arm securely around Lily's shoulders and pulled her close to my side, shielding her from their glares. "You all wanted to handle our family business in public. You wanted an audience. So, we are handling it in front of the audience." Wyatt stood up forcefully. He slammed his palms down on the table, rattling the fine china and causing a wine glass to tip over dangerously. "You are bluffing. You have absolutely nothing. You are a broken, pathetic man who cannot even manage his own life without his wife holding his hand." I just stared at him. I looked at the expensive gold watch gleaming on his wrist. I thought about the shiny, brand-new Porsche 911 sitting right outside in the icy driveway. I knew exactly how he had paid for that car, and very soon, everyone else in this room would know too. The doorbell rang. The sharp, piercing chime cut through the dining room like a gunshot. Nobody moved a muscle. Nobody breathed. My father glared furiously at the heavy wooden front door down the hallway. My mother gripped the edge of the dining table so hard her knuckles turned white. But to truly understand what happened when that heavy front door opened, and why my own parents and brother were actively trying to strip me of everything I had in the world, you need to know how we got to this dining room in the first place. You need to know what they did to me when I was at my absolute lowest point, when I was bleeding out emotionally and looking for a lifeline. You see, this was not just a simple family disagreement about bad behavior. This was a calculated, cold-blooded ambush. And they had been planning it meticulously for a very long time. It all started 18 months earlier. That was the day my entire world was ripped apart and set on fire. If you have ever trusted the people who share your last name, only to turn around and realize they were holding a knife behind their backs waiting for you to stumble, you will understand exactly what I went through. Let me take you back to a completely ordinary Tuesday afternoon in July. The exact moment the old Joshua died, and the man sitting at that Christmas table was forged. It was 3 o'clock on a Tuesday. The sun was beating down hard, and I was sitting in my pickup truck outside Lily's elementary school. The engine was running, the air conditioning was blowing on high, and I was watching hundreds of kids spill out of the double front doors with their colorful backpacks bouncing behind them. I was sitting there thinking about perfectly regular, mundane things. I needed to swing by the grocery store to buy milk and bread on the way home. I was mentally rehearsing a pitch for a major promotion at work the next quarter, hoping the increase in my salary would let us take a nice vacation to the beach that summer. It was an ordinary, beautiful life. My phone buzzed in the center console. I glanced down. It was an unknown local number. I almost let it go straight to voicemail, figuring it was just another telemarketer. But something made me answer. "Hello," I said. "Is this Joshua Whitmore?" The voice on the other end was clinical, controlled, but carrying a heavy, unmistakable weight. "Yes, this is him. Mr. Whitmore, this is Dr. Nathan calling from the emergency department at Mercy General Hospital. Your wife, Emily, was involved in a severe motor vehicle accident on Interstate 84. You need to come here immediately. There are moments in life when your world shatters, but it does not happen loudly. It just goes completely, terrifyingly silent. All the noise from the school playground, the laughing kids, the revving engines of the school buses. It all faded into a dull, distant hum. I do not remember the drive to the hospital. I do not remember calling my neighbor to rush over and pick up Lily from the sidewalk. I just remember running frantically through a hospital hallway. The walls were too white. The fluorescent lights overhead were too bright, burning my eyes. I remember Dr. Nathan stepping out of a surgical room wearing blood-stained blue scrubs. He pulled off his surgical mask, looked at me with deep pity in his eyes, shook his head slowly, and told me that Emily did not survive the impact. A drunk driver had crossed the median. She died instantly. She was 34 years old. We had been married for 10 incredible years. She was my rock, my best friend, my entire world. And just like that, in the blink of an eye, she was permanently gone. The funeral was held 4 agonizing days later. The church was packed wall to wall with people wearing black suits, the suffocating smell of heavy floral perfume, and the constant sound of muffled crying and rustling tissue paper. I stood near the front pew, holding tightly to Lily's hand. I felt completely hollowed out. I was just an empty shell of a human being, going through the mandatory motions of grief while my brain refused to process reality. My family, however, treated my wife's funeral like it was a high-profile corporate networking event. My father, Robert, stood by the entrance shaking hands with attendees, standing tall, his jaw set, barely showing a single hint of genuine sadness. He walked over to me, gripped my shoulder hard enough to leave a bruise, and leaned in. "You need to be a man now, Joshua," he said, his voice low and stern. "Tears will not bring her back. Crying does nothing. You have a child to raise. Pull yourself together and stop making a scene." There was no hug. There was no comfort. Just a cold set of instructions on how to perform grief appropriately. Later, during the reception in the church hall, I needed to escape the pitying stares. I stepped into the dark hallway near the kitchen to get some air. The kitchen door was cracked open just an inch. Through the gap, I heard my brother Wyatt talking to my mother. "He is an absolute mess," Wyatt said smoothly, sipping a cup of coffee. "He cannot handle custody of Lily alone. He barely makes a decent salary as it is. He is going to crack under the pressure." "I know," my mother replied, sighing heavily. "If Emily were here, things would be fine. She was the organized one. But Joshua, he is going to fail. We will have to step in eventually and take over. For the child's sake." They were talking about me like I was a broken appliance, like I was an annoying logistical problem they needed to manage, rather than a grieving husband and father. I backed away quietly. I was too numb and exhausted to fight back right then. 3 months after the funeral, the life insurance settlement finally cleared. Emily, always the practical and forward-thinking one, had insisted on taking out a massive policy the moment Lily was born. I always argued with her about it, telling her it was a waste of money, that we were young and healthy and invincible. She proved me wrong in the absolute worst way possible. The money hit my bank account on a rainy Friday morning. It was a staggering, life-changing amount of cash. But looking at all those zeros on my computer screen did not bring me any peace or comfort. It did not feel like wealth. It just looked like a bloody receipt for my wife's life. But the shift in my family's behavior was practically instantaneous. Suddenly, my phone started ringing off the hook. It was Wyatt. He had barely spoken 3 words to me in the months since the funeral, but now he was calling multiple times a week just to check in. He even drove over to my house one afternoon in a brand new, gleaming black Porsche 911. "Just doing really well at the firm lately," Wyatt bragged, leaning casually against the shiny hood of the sports car while I stood on my porch. "Thought I would treat myself to an upgrade. How are you holding up, Josh? You know I'm here for you, right?" My mother started inviting Lily and me to Sunday dinners every single week. She baked homemade pies. She bought Lily expensive, unnecessary toys. My father started cornering me after dinner, constantly asking about my financial plans, offering to introduce me to his exclusive wealth management guys. For a brief, stupid moment, I thought they were actually trying to be a real family. I thought the tragedy had softened them and they were trying to help me through my grief. I was naive. The vultures were just circling the carcass. The trap finally snapped shut during one of those mandatory Sunday dinners. We had just finished eating dessert. The dishes were still on the table. My father cleared his throat loudly and looked directly at Wyatt. Wyatt nodded, reached into his sleek leather briefcase, pulled out a thick manila folder, and slid it smoothly across the polished wood table toward me. "Joshua," my father said, using his deep, authoritative business voice, "we have been talking about your situation. You are grieving heavily. You are working full-time. You are trying to raise Lily completely on your own. Handling all that insurance money on top of everything else is just too much stress for you right now." I stared down at the blank manila folder. My stomach tied itself into a knot. "I am managing perfectly fine." "No, you are really not." Wyatt jumped in smoothly. He smiled, but his eyes were entirely dead and cold. "You are overwhelmed, man. I deal with high-value assets every single day. I can set up a secure college fund for Lily, invest the rest of the capital, and make it grow exponentially. All you have to do is sign this power of attorney. Just let me handle the heavy lifting so you can focus on healing." They wanted full legal control of my finances. They wanted the master keys to the vault. "I am not signing away control of my money to anyone," I said firmly, pushing the folder away. The room went completely dead silent. My mother frowned, looking at me like I was an ungrateful child. "Joshua, do not be stubborn and difficult. Wyatt is a licensed professional. We are just trying to protect you from making terrible financial mistakes." "Protect me from what exactly?" I asked, looking between the three of them. Nobody answered. The air was thick with unspoken tension. I stood up, pushed the folder back across the table, grabbed Lily's hand, and left the house without another word. I drew my very first real boundary that night, and they hated me for it. As I was walking out to my truck in the dark driveway that night, feeling the cold wind bite at my face, I felt a frail hand grab my arm from the shadows. I jumped. It was my grandmother Eleanor. She was 85 years old, walked slowly with a silver-handled cane, but her mind was sharper than anyone else living in that massive house. She looked nervously around the driveway to make sure no one was watching from the front windows. She reached into her cardigan pocket and pressed a small, folded piece of paper directly into my palm. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Do not sign a single thing they give you," she whispered. Her voice was raspy, urgent, and filled with warning. "Your father's business is failing terribly. Wyatt is lying to everyone about his success. Take this. Call this number tomorrow. His name is Adrian Cole. He is a brilliant lawyer. Trust him, Joshua. Do not trust them." Before I could ask her anything, before I could demand an explanation, she turned around and walked slowly and carefully back into the house, disappearing behind the heavy oak door. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, staring at the small piece of paper under the dome light. A lawyer? Why on earth did I need a high-powered lawyer to deal with my own parents and my own brother? I folded the paper and slid it into my wallet. I desperately wanted to believe my grandmother was just getting old and paranoid. I wanted to believe my family was annoying, overbearing, maybe a bit pushy, but not actually malicious or evil. I waited 2 full weeks to make that call. I will regret that delay for the rest of my life. I wish I had made it that exact same night. A few days after the dinner incident, the whispers and rumors started circulating. I was sitting at my desk at work when I got a text message from my cousin Aaron. Aaron was the guy I grew up playing baseball with, the guy I considered my closest ally in the extended family. "Hey man, heard you were going through a really rough patch. If you need help dealing with the gambling stuff, let me know. Absolutely no judgment here. We are family." Gambling? I stared at my phone screen in total disbelief. I had never gambled a single day in my life. I barely even bought lottery tickets. I immediately stepped out of my office and called Aaron. "Where exactly did you hear that?" I demanded the second he answered. Aaron stuttered, clearly caught off guard by my tone. Man, it was in the family group chat. Wyatt said you were blowing the insurance money on late-night sports bets and acting completely erratic." Aunt Helen chimed in and said she was genuinely worried about Lily's safety living in your house. I felt physically sick to my stomach. I was not in the family group chat. They had conveniently removed me from it a week after Emily died, claiming they wanted to spare me from inconsequential chatter while I mourned. The worst part? I had confided in Aaron just a week prior. I had met him for a beer and told him I was having trouble sleeping and feeling immense pressure about being a single dad. Aaron took my vulnerability, twisted it into a weapon, and fed it directly back to Wyatt. Aaron was their spy. They were systematically laying the groundwork. They were building a massive, false narrative. If they told every single aunt, uncle, and cousin that I was an unstable, gambling addict who was neglecting his daughter, then when they finally swooped in with their legal papers and took my money, the rest of the family would not ask questions. They would applaud them for saving me from myself. I hung up on Aaron without saying another word. I walked straight to my truck, pulled my wallet out, found the wrinkled piece of paper my grandmother had given me, and dialed Adrian Cole's number. The rumors they spread to the adults were disgusting, but what they did to my daughter was absolutely unforgivable. I picked Lily up from school on a Friday afternoon. Usually, she runs out to the truck, practically vibrating with energy, talking a mile a minute about recess, her friends, or art class. That day, she dragged her feet across the pavement. She climbed silently into the passenger seat, threw her backpack onto the floor mats, and just stared blankly out the window. "What is wrong, sweetie?" I asked, putting the truck in gear. She kept her head turned away. "Nothing." I knew that tone. I pulled the truck over to the side of the road and put it in park. I unbuckled my seatbelt. "Lily, look at me, please. Did someone say something mean to you today?" She slowly turned to face me. Her little eyes were bloodshot and filled with heavy tears. She took a shaky breath. "Grandma came to the school playground today during afternoon recess. She stood by the fence." My heart started pounding furiously against my ribs. "What did she say to you, Lily?" Lily wiped her nose with her sleeve, her voice trembling. "She asked if you were yelling at home a lot. I told her no, you never yell. Then she said if Mom was still alive, I would have a much better future. She said you are too broken and sad to take care of me properly." I gripped the leather steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned completely white and my forearms ached. My own mother had bypassed me entirely and went straight for the fragile mind of an 8-year-old grieving child. She was actively trying to make my daughter doubt my love, my stability, and my capability as a father. I leaned over the center console and hugged Lily as tightly as I could. "Listen to me very carefully," I said, making absolutely sure my voice was steady and full of conviction. "Your grandmother is completely wrong. I will never, ever stop taking care of you. You are my whole world, and nothing is going to happen to our family." That was the exact moment I stopped playing defense. I was done being the grieving widower. I was going to war. The very next morning, I sat across a heavy, polished mahogany desk from Adrian Cole. His office was high up in a glass building downtown, impeccably clean and intimidating. Adrian was a tall man in a dark, perfectly tailored suit. He was completely calm, clinical, and unbothered. He did not offer me pathetic, sympathetic looks. He offered me hard facts. "Your grandmother hired my firm a month ago to quietly investigate your brother and your father," Adrian said, folding his hands on the desk. He pushed a thick, heavy black binder across the polished wood toward me. "Open it." I opened the binder. The very first page was a printed email chain. The subject line made my blood run cold. It read, "Operation Joshua." It was an email from Wyatt to my mother, dated exactly 2 weeks after my wife's funeral. 2 weeks. "Mom, we need to move fast on this. Joshua is emotionally compromised and sleep-deprived. He will fold under coordinated family pressure. If we get him to sign the POA, I can legally transfer the funds to save Dad's company and cover my own margin calls. Start planting the seeds. Tell the family he is unstable." My hands started shaking violently holding the paper. "They planned this while I was picking out my wife's casket," I whispered, the reality crashing over me. "Yes, Adrian said flatly, pointing a pen at the document. They created a meticulous paper trail of fake concern. But that is not all. Keep turning the pages. I turned the page. It was a dense, complex financial report. Your father's construction company is drowning in debt, Adrian explained, tracing a line of red numbers. He owes suppliers hundreds of thousands of dollars. He has leveraged everything. He is weeks, maybe days, away from declaring complete bankruptcy. And Wyatt? I asked, looking up. Wyatt is significantly worse, Adrian said, his tone turning sharp. He is not a successful wealth manager. He is a desperate fraud. He lost a massive amount of his clients' money in terrible, highly leveraged real estate investments. Remember that brand new Porsche 911 he drives around? I nodded slowly. He bought that vehicle using funds he illegally siphoned from a private investor named Charles. Wyatt is leveraged to the absolute breaking point. He needs your life insurance settlement to pay back the people he stole from, or he is going to face federal prison time for wire fraud. I sat back heavily in my leather chair. The sheer scale of their desperation, the utter depravity of their lies, was staggering. They were bankrupt, corrupt, and willing to destroy my life to save their own skin. Adrian slid one final, terrifying document across the desk. It was a printed log of recorded phone calls. This is the most disturbing part of the investigation. Wyatt called your life insurance provider last week. He pretended to be you. He actually tried to initiate a change of beneficiary form over the phone, but he failed the security questions regarding Emily's maiden name. He is actively trying to commit identity theft and wire fraud. They were not just trying to manipulate me emotionally. They were trying to completely steal my identity and my daughter's future. What do we do? I asked, looking Adrian dead in the eye. I felt no fear anymore, only a cold, calculating rage. Adrian closed the heavy binder with a satisfying thud. We let them think they are winning. We let them back you into a corner in front of an audience. We let them get arrogant. And then we drop the hammer. Which brings us right back to that suffocating Christmas dinner. The doorbell rang. The sound hung in the tense air of the dining room. My grandmother Eleanor stood up slowly from the table. She gripped her silver cane. "Mother, sit down," Robert yelled, his face turning purple. "I will handle whoever the hell this is." "It is my house, Robert," Eleanor snapped back. Her voice was surprisingly loud, cutting through his authority like a hot knife through butter. "And I invited him." She walked down the hall and opened the heavy door. Adrian Cole walked into the dining room. He wore a long, dark wool trench coat and carried that same heavy leather briefcase I had seen in his office. He stepped fully into the light, looking around the table, his eyes locking coldly onto Wyatt, and then my father. "Good evening," Adrian said. His voice was incredibly smooth, carrying effortlessly over the silence. "I am Adrian Cole. I represent Joshua Whitmore and Eleanor Whitmore." My father laughed, a harsh, barking, arrogant sound. "A lawyer? Joshua, you brought a damn lawyer to Christmas dinner? This is pathetic. Get him out of here right now before I call the police." "I am not leaving," Adrian said. He walked right to the center of the room, displacing my cousin Aaron, and placed his briefcase firmly on the dining table, right next to the massive roasted turkey. He unlatched it. Click, click. "What is this nonsense?" Wyatt demanded. He was trying to sound tough, trying to maintain his alpha persona, but I saw a visible bead of sweat roll down the side of his temple. "This is a private residence. You are trespassing on private property. I am here to clarify some pressing financial matters," Adrian said, opening the briefcase. "Since you have all been so incredibly concerned about Joshua's well-being and his financial stability, we thought it was only fair to share the absolute truth with the entire family." Adrian reached in and pulled out a thick stack of printed papers. "Let us start with the emails," Adrian said. He looked directly at my aunt and uncle, then at Aaron. "For the past few months, you have been repeatedly told that Joshua is a gambling addict, that he is an unfit father spiraling out of control. I have here a certified digital forensics report." Adrian held up the printed email high enough for everyone to see the header. He read Wyatt's exact words out loud, his voice booming. Operation Joshua. Tell the family he is unstable. If we get the POA, I can transfer the funds to cover my margin calls and save Dad's company. The room erupted in loud gasps. Uncle Thomas stared at Wyatt in absolute, open-mouthed shock. Aaron slouched down so far in his chair he practically disappeared, his face draining of all color. That is fake, Wyatt yelled, jumping up, pointing a violently shaking finger at Adrian. He fabricated that. That is a lie. It is digitally authenticated via your IP address, Adrian replied calmly, not missing a beat. And so are the bank records showing that your father's construction company is entirely insolvent and facing imminent bankruptcy. And the wire transfer records showing that you, Wyatt, stole funds from your client, Charles, to purchase a Porsche 911. My mother put her hands over her face, shaking her head frantically. Stop, she cried out. Stop it right now, please. You did not stop when you told my daughter I was broken, I said to her. My voice was low, but it carried across the room perfectly. You did not stop when you tried to steal the money meant for my child's college fund. My father stepped forward aggressively, his fists clenched at his sides. We are your family, Joshua. You owe us. We raised you. I owe you absolutely nothing, I said. Actually, Robert, Grandma Eleanor spoke up, her voice ringing clear. She walked forward and stood directly next to me, placing a hand on my arm. You are the ones who owe. She looked at Adrian and gave a single, firm nod. Adrian reached deeply into the briefcase one last time. He pulled out a blue, heavy stock folder with a thick gold notary seal stamped on the front. This is the final item of business, Adrian announced. The room was so quiet you could hear the snow hitting the window glass outside. This is the last will and testament of Eleanor Whitmore, executed and notarized 3 weeks ago in my office. My father froze completely. His anger evaporated into sheer terror. Mother, what did you do? Adrian opened the folder and read the legal text with perfect diction. I, Eleanor Whitmore, being of sound mind, hereby revoke all previous wills and codicils. I leave my primary residence, all land, and my entire estate, valued at approximately $1.8 million, solely to my grandson, Joshua Whitmore. I explicitly disinherit my son, Robert, and my grandson, Wyatt, due to egregious financial misconduct and moral failing. The silence shattered into a million pieces. Wyatt let out a horrific sound that was half scream, half sob. He grabbed his hair. No, no, that house was supposed to be mine. You promised me my inheritance. I promised a loyal grandson, Eleanor said, looking at Wyatt with absolute, unfiltered disgust. You are a thief. And Robert, you are a coward who enabled him. My mother burst into loud, hysterical tears, collapsing into her chair. My father slumped down, staring blankly at the polished wood table. In less than 5 minutes, they had gone from thinking they were going to bully me into handing over my life savings, to losing their entire $1.8 million inheritance and having their criminal fraud exposed to everyone they knew. It was the most satisfying, vindicating moment of my entire life. This is a game-changing moment, when I finally regained control of my life. Thank you for your patience in getting this far. You are amazing. Please help me like the video and leave a comment below so I know you've been with me. This will not only help more people find this story, but also let me know that my experiences are meaningful to someone. Your support is my biggest motivation to continue sharing the rest of this journey. The brutal reality of the situation crashed down on them like a collapsing concrete building. Wyatt was hyperventilating, his chest heaving. He grabbed his phone off the table and started scrolling frantically with shaking thumbs. This is not legal. We will fight this in court. We will contest the will. You cannot do this to us. I will get a lawyer. Contest it with what money? Adrian asked calmly, adjusting his cuffs. Your assets are frozen pending investigation. In fact, I took the liberty of contacting your primary investor, Charles, earlier this afternoon. I informed him of the severe discrepancies in his portfolio. He should be calling you right about. Before Adrian could even finish his sentence, Wyatt's phone started ringing loudly on the table. The caller ID flashed brightly on the screen for everyone to see. Charles. Wyatt stared at the phone like it was a live, ticking grenade. He did not answer. The phone just kept ringing, vibrating violently against the wood, echoing the impending, unavoidable ruin of his entire life. He knew Charles would demand his money, and he knew a nasty divorce from his wife would follow the moment the fraud went public. My father looked at me. The arrogant anger was completely gone, replaced by absolute, pathetic desperation. The man who had just 10 minutes ago told me to get out of his house was now looking at me with wide, pleading eyes. "Joshua, please," my father begged, his voice cracking, shedding his tough guy persona instantly. "We are family. I am about to lose my business. I will lose everything I built. You have the insurance money. You can help us fix this. We can work this out privately." "You did not want help," I said, looking down at him with zero sympathy. "You wanted a bailout at the expense of my daughter's future. You tried to steal from a widow's fund. You have to live with the consequences of that." My mother reached across the table, desperately trying to grab my hand. "Joshua, I am so sorry. We were just scared. Wyatt said it was the only way to save the family name. Please, do not walk away from us." I pulled my hand back sharply. The sight of her tears did absolutely nothing to me anymore. "You lost the right to call me your son the second you attacked Lily at her school. You made your choice." I turned my back on the table. I walked over to the antique coat rack in the corner and grabbed Lily's small winter jacket. I knelt down on one knee and gently helped her put her arms through the sleeves. I zipped it up to her chin and put her little pink knit hat on her head. "Are we leaving now, Daddy?" Lily whispered, her eyes wide but no longer terrified. "Yes, sweetie," I said softly, giving her a reassuring smile. "We are going home." I stood up and picked her up, resting her securely on my hip. She wrapped her small arms tightly around my neck. I looked at Grandma Eleanor. "Are you ready, Grandma?" She smiled, a genuine, warm, victorious smile. She gripped her silver cane tightly and walked over to us, standing tall despite her age. "I have been ready to leave this toxic house for years, Joshua. Let us go." We walked together toward the front door. Not a single person in that dining room tried to stop us. The aunts and uncles who had judged me, the cousins who had believed the lies, all parted like the Red Sea to let us through. Uncle Thomas looked firmly at the floor. Aaron looked at the wall, too ashamed to meet my gaze. They knew they had backed the wrong side, and now they were stuck in the sinking ship. I opened the heavy oak door. The freezing winter air hit my face, but it felt incredibly refreshing. Felt clean. As we stepped out onto the snowy porch, I heard Wyatt screaming inside, a high-pitched, terrifying sound of total panic as Charles called his phone for a third time. I heard my father yelling viciously at my mother. The house was tearing itself apart from the inside out. I pulled the door shut behind us, locking out the noise, the lies, and the poison forever. We walked down the icy driveway, right past Wyatt's shiny, ridiculous Porsche. I knew it would be repossessed before the week was over. I unlocked my truck, carefully helped my grandmother into the passenger seat, and buckled Lily securely into the back. As I climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine, Lily leaned forward against her seatbelt. "Daddy?" she said softly. "Yes, Lily? You were really awesome in there," she whispered, a small smile breaking across her face. I looked at her in the rearview mirror and smiled back. The crushing, suffocating weight that I had been carrying on my chest for 18 agonizing months was completely gone. The storm was finally over. We drove away into the quiet, snowy night, leaving the toxic wreckage of that family entirely behind us, heading toward a new life. 3 months passed since that explosive Christmas dinner. 3 months since we walked out of that massive, suffocating brick mansion and left the toxic wreckage of my family entirely behind us. And let me tell you, Those 90 days felt like stepping out of a dark, freezing cave and finally feeling the warm sun on my face. The very first thing we did was move Grandma Eleanor into my apartment. Now, my place was not a sprawling, multi-million-dollar estate. It was a modest, two-bedroom apartment on the second floor of a quiet building. It had scuffed hardwood floors, a kitchen that was barely big enough for two people to stand in, and a tiny balcony that overlooked a busy suburban street. When I first offered to have her move in, I warned her about the lack of space. I told her she was used to luxury, high ceilings, and completely silent hallways. Grandma Eleanor just looked at me, tapped her silver cane on my scuffed floor, and said, "Joshua, a house is just wood and stone. A home is where you do not have to sleep with one eye open." And she was absolutely right. The transition was incredible. We moved her heavy, antique floral armchair right into the corner of my small living room. We lined her delicate china teacups along the narrow windowsill above the kitchen sink. Her knitting basket claimed a permanent, respected space right next to the television stand. It was a tight squeeze, but it never felt cramped. Felt intentional. Felt incredibly safe. The silence in our apartment was different from the silence at my parents' house. Over there, silence was a weapon. It meant someone was angry, someone was judging you, or someone was plotting against you behind closed doors. In our apartment, the silence was just peaceful. We spent our evenings eating dinner at a small, round wooden table. 3 plates, 3 glasses. No hidden agendas, no interrogations about my finances, no passive-aggressive comments about my parenting. Lily changed the most. During those dark 18 months after Emily died, my daughter had become a shadow. She walked quietly, spoke softly, and always looked over her shoulder, completely terrified of doing something that would upset my mother or my father. But living with Grandma Eleanor brought the light back into her eyes. They spent hours together in that tiny kitchen. Grandma taught Lily how to bake authentic apple pies from scratch, getting flour all over the counters and laughing until their stomachs hurt. In return, Lily taught Grandma how to navigate video calls on her new tablet and how to play games on the television. I watched my daughter heal right in front of my eyes. I watched her realize that she was deeply, unconditionally loved, and that nobody was ever going to make her feel like a burden again. As for the money, the insurance settlement that my family had fought so viciously to steal, I made sure it was completely untouchable. I sat down with my lawyer, Adrian Cole, in his downtown office. We spent hours drafting ironclad legal documents. I did not buy a sports car. I did not buy a massive house to show off. I took the vast majority of those funds and put them directly into a highly secured trust and a massive college fund for Lily. Adrian structured it so that no one, not even myself under duress, could liquidate those assets without a grueling legal process involving independent financial fiduciaries. Her future was locked down. Her education was guaranteed. Nobody would ever be able to leverage her security for their own selfish gain ever again. With that massive weight off my shoulders, my professional life completely turned around. I was no longer showing up to work sleep-deprived, paranoid, and emotionally drained from fighting off my brother's manipulation. My mind was finally clear. I poured my energy into my job, and 2 months after Christmas, I finally landed that major promotion I had been pitching for. The new title came with a substantial salary increase, giving us more than enough monthly income to support myself, Lily, and Grandma Eleanor with absolute comfort. We did not need their millions. We had built our own solid foundation, brick by honest brick. While we were building a beautiful new life in our small apartment, the empire my father and brother had tried to forcefully maintain was spectacularly burning to the ground. And I would be lying to you if I said I did not feel a deep, profound sense of satisfaction watching the karma unfold. Adrian Cole became more than just my lawyer. He became a trusted friend. We met for coffee at a small diner downtown one Tuesday morning, and he brought a thick manila folder filled with public records and updates on the Whitmore family. He slid the folder across the table, took a sip of his black coffee, and gave me the rundown. "Your father officially filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy yesterday morning," Adrian said, his voice completely neutral, but I could see a hint of a smile in his eyes. I opened the folder and looked at the legal filings. It was a total massacre. My father's construction company, the business he had held over my head my entire life as the ultimate symbol of success and masculine authority, was completely liquidated. His suppliers had sued him. The banks had called in all his highly leveraged commercial loans. The heavy machinery, the trucks, the office building, everything was seized and auctioned off to pay pennies on the dollar to his creditors. "And the house?" I asked, looking up at Adrian. "The bank took it," Adrian replied. They had secretly taken out a massive second mortgage on the property to try and float the failing business and cover some of Wyatt's initial losses. Without your grandmother's inheritance to act as a safety net, they defaulted immediately. Robert and Helen have exactly 30 days to vacate the premises. My parents, the people who had proudly kicked me out of their dining room for not acting like family, were now being evicted from that very same house. They were going to have to downsize drastically, moving into a small rental, stripped of all the wealth and social status they cared so deeply about. But my father's downfall was nothing compared to the absolute explosion of Wyatt's life. Wyatt had spent his entire adult life pretending to be the golden child. He wore the custom suits, he bought the expensive watches, and he looked down on my modest salary and my quiet life. But it was all a house of cards built on fraud, theft, and incredible arrogance. Charles, the private investor, did exactly what we expected him to do, Adrian explained, tapping a legal document in the folder. The moment I informed him about the discrepancies, he hired a forensic accountant. They found everything. Wyatt had been running a miniature Ponzi scheme, moving money between client accounts to cover his massive losses in commercial real estate. Charles pressed charges immediately. Wyatt was officially under investigation for federal wire fraud and embezzlement. His licenses to practice wealth management were permanently suspended. The firm he worked for fired him instantly and publicly distanced themselves from his crimes. But the poetic justice did not stop there. "The Porsche," I said, remembering the shiny black car sitting in the snowy driveway on Christmas. "What happened to the car?" Adrian actually chuckled. "Repossessed. The leasing company showed up with a tow truck at 6 in the morning on a Sunday. Half the neighborhood watched them drag it out of his driveway while Wyatt stood on his lawn in his bathrobe, screaming at the driver." The public humiliation was the one thing Wyatt feared more than anything else in the world. But the final nail in his coffin came from inside his own home. "His wife served him with divorce papers last Thursday," Adrian said, handing me the public filing. "She is filing for sole custody of their children, citing his impending criminal charges and the complete loss of their financial estate. She is also suing him for hiding massive debts during their marriage. Wyatt had tried to steal my money to save his fake, hollow life. Instead, his greed had cost him his career, his freedom, his luxury cars, his marriage, and his own family. He was going to lose custody of his kids, the very thing he had cruelly whispered I was unfit to handle at my wife's funeral. Consequences are not revenge. They are just gravity. You jump off a cliff, you fall. My brother and my father had jumped willingly, and they had nobody to blame for the violent impact but themselves." The dust had mostly settled by late March. We were enjoying a quiet Tuesday evening. Lily was asleep in her bedroom, Grandma Eleanor was reading a novel in her armchair, and I was sitting at the kitchen table reviewing some reports for my new position at work. My cell phone vibrated on the wooden table. I looked at the screen. It was an unsaved number, but I recognized the local area code. I let it ring 3 times before I finally picked it up. "Hello," I said. "Joshua." It was my mother, Helen. Her voice was incredibly small, completely stripped of the arrogant, commanding tone she had used my entire life. She sounded frail, exhausted, and remarkably old. I did not hang up, but I did not offer a warm greeting either. I stood up, walked quietly out to the small balcony, and slid the glass door shut behind me so Grandma and Lily would not hear a single word of this conversation. The cool spring air hit my face. "What do you want, Helen?" I asked. I did not call her Mom. I had lost my mother 18 months ago in that hospital hallway. The woman on the phone was just a stranger who shared my DNA. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, followed by a quiet sob. "Please do not call me that, Joshua. Please. I am your mother." "You lost the right to that title on Christmas," I replied, my voice hard and entirely unyielding. "Why are you calling me?" "We are packing the house," she cried, her voice breaking. "The bank is making us leave by Friday. We are moving into a tiny 2-bedroom apartment near the highway. Your father will not even speak to me. He just sits in his office chair staring at the wall all day. Wyatt is facing federal prison, Joshua. His wife took the kids and left him. Our entire family is completely destroyed." She paused, clearly waiting for me to offer some kind of sympathy. She wanted me to jump in, to comfort her, to play the role of the good, obedient son who always smoothed over the uncomfortable moments. I remained completely silent. I let the silence stretch out, heavy and punishing, until she was forced to fill it herself. "I am sorry," she finally sobbed. "I am so sorry, Joshua. I was just terrified. Your father's business was failing, and Wyatt kept telling us that you had more money than you needed, that you were not in your right mind to manage it. He swore to us that taking control of your accounts was the only way to save the family legacy. I let myself believe him because I was terrified of losing our social standing." "You were terrified of losing your country club membership," I corrected her, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous octave. "You were terrified of the neighbors finding out your golden boy Wyatt was a complete fraud. So you decided to sacrifice me. You decided to sacrifice my daughter's future to buy yourself more time." "It was a mistake," she pleaded. "I was not thinking clearly. But what I said to Lily, what I said about Emily, Joshua, I cannot sleep at night. I see Lily's terrified face every time I close my eyes. Please, you have to believe me, I never meant to hurt her. I was just trying to shock you into signing the papers. I thought I was doing what was necessary for the greater good of the family." "The greater good?" I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that echoed off the brick wall of my balcony. "You walked up to an 8-year-old girl who had just watched her mother being lowered into the ground. You looked into her eyes, and you told her that her dead mother would have given her a better life. You told her that her father was broken and useless. There is no greater good in that, Helen. That is pure, unadulterated evil. That is the act of a monster." She broke down completely, sobbing loudly into the phone. I know I was wrong. Please, Joshua, I have lost everything. I have lost my home. My husband is a shell of a man. My oldest son is going to jail. You are all I have left. Please let me see Lily. Let me come over and apologize to her. Let us try to rebuild this family. I will do whatever you want." I leaned against the cold metal railing of the balcony and looked out at the streetlights. A year ago, her tears would have manipulated me. A year ago, I would have folded, prioritized her comfort over my own peace, and let her right back into my life because of a misplaced sense of filial duty. But I was not that man anymore. That man died the day he realized his family viewed him as prey. "You do not get to see Lily," I said, my voice absolutely resolute. "You will never see Lily again. You will never step foot near her school, you will never call my phone, and you will never send her a birthday card. If I even see your car driving down my street, I will have Adrian Cole file a restraining order against you so fast it will make your head spin." "Joshua, please, you cannot do this to your own mother. It is cruel," she begged, desperation making her voice shrill. "It is not cruel," I answered calmly. "It is protection. You chose your golden child, Helen. You backed Wyatt. You helped him strategize. You chose to protect his shiny Porsche and his fake lifestyle over my grieving family. Now, you get to live with the consequences of that choice. Enjoy your new apartment." "Joshua, wait." I ended the call. I tapped the screen, blocked the number, and deleted the contact history. I stood on the balcony for a few more minutes, breathing in the cool night air. I did not feel angry. I did not feel sad. I just felt incredibly, wonderfully light. The final thread binding me to that toxic history was officially cut. I slid the glass door open and walked back inside to my real family. I sat down in my favorite chair by the window. The apartment was quiet, except for the soft ticking of the clock on the wall and the gentle sound of Grandma Eleanor turning the pages of her book. I looked down the short hallway toward Lily's slightly open bedroom door. The soft glow of her nightlight spilled out onto the floor. I knew she was sleeping soundly, completely safe, completely loved. I spent a lot of time reflecting that night. I thought about the word family. Society pushes this massive, heavy narrative down our throats from the moment we are born. We are told that blood is thicker than water. We are told that you have to forgive your parents no matter what they do to you, because they gave you life. We are told that loyalty to your last name is the ultimate virtue of a good man. I used to believe that garbage. I used to think that being a strong man meant absorbing the blows. I thought it meant keeping the peace at the dinner table, swallowing my pride, and taking the emotional hits so that nobody else had to feel uncomfortable. When my father told me to be a man at my wife's funeral, he did not mean he wanted me to be strong. He meant he wanted me to be silent. He wanted me to be compliant. He wanted me to suppress my humanity so I would be easier to control and easier to rob. But what I learned over those agonizing 18 months is that keeping a toxic peace is just a slow form of suicide. Strength is not about volume. It is not about dominating a room or driving a ridiculously expensive car bought with stolen money like my brother Wyatt. Strength is about holding the line. Strength is looking at the people who gave you life and telling them, "No, you do not have permission to destroy me." Manhood is not about suppressing your emotions. It is about channeling your fierce love into absolute protection. When I saw the damage my mother inflicted on Lily, something primal woke up inside of me. I realized that my ultimate duty on this earth was not to be a good son to Robert and Helen. My ultimate duty was to be an impenetrable shield for Lily. They called me selfish for refusing to sign over my life savings to save their failing businesses. They called me mentally unstable and started rumors about gambling to isolate me. They literally told me that Christmas would be better without me. They threw every single weapon they had in their arsenal at me, expecting me to crumble into dust. But here is what they totally failed to understand. Grief did not make me weak. It stripped away all my illusions. Losing Emily taught me exactly how short and incredibly fragile life is. It taught me that I did not have the time or the energy to waste on people who only valued me for what they could extract from my bank account. I looked over at Grandma Eleanor. She had given up her massive, luxurious, $1.8 million estate to come live in a cramped apartment with a grieving father and a traumatized little girl. She had legally disinherited her own son and her golden grandson because her moral compass demanded justice. She chose the hard right over the easy wrong. That is when the absolute truth hit me. Family is not blood. Blood is just an accident of biology. Blood means absolutely nothing if it is not backed up by respect, loyalty, and unconditional care. Family is purely about behavior. Family is about the people who show up when the world falls apart, not the people who show up with empty briefcases when the insurance check clears. I would rather sit in this tiny apartment, eating cheap takeout food with the two people who genuinely love me and choose me every single day, than sit at the head of a massive mahogany table surrounded by 15 relatives who only respect the balance of my bank account. I did not just survive their ambush, I completely dismantled it. And in doing so, I finally built the beautiful, honest life that my wife Emily would have been incredibly proud of. If you are watching this video right now, and you are sitting there with a heavy heart because my story sounds a little too familiar, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I know exactly how hard it is to realize that the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally are actually your biggest enemies. I know the paralyzing guilt that comes when you finally consider walking away from your parents or your siblings. Society will try to shame you. Extended relatives will call you difficult, selfish, and stubborn. They will tell you to just let it go, to just apologize and keep the peace. Do not listen to them. You do not owe your abusers access to your life just because you share a family tree. You do not owe anyone your financial security, your mental health, or the safety of your children just to maintain a comfortable illusion for the rest of the relatives. Cutting off toxic family members is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of profound self-preservation. It is a rescue mission where you are saving yourself. When I walked out of that dining room on Christmas Day, with my daughter in my arms and my grandmother by my side, I did not lose my family. I finally found it. I stopped asking for permission to stand up for myself. I stopped waiting for an apology that was never going to come. I took control of the narrative, I hired a ruthless lawyer, and I let the brutal truth do all the heavy lifting. And let me tell you, the peace that waits for you on the other side of that terrifying decision is worth every single ounce of the struggle. Let us take a step back and look at the real, practical lessons we can pull from this nightmare. This is the educational part of our journey together today, and I want you to really absorb this. First, never, ever ignore your intuition when it comes to sudden shifts in people's behavior. If someone who has ignored you for years suddenly shows up when you inherit money or achieve success, they are not there for you. They are there for the resources. Second, establishing boundaries is the highest form of self-care. A boundary is simply saying, "This is where I begin, and this is where your disrespect ends." If people get angry when you set a boundary, it simply proves why you needed that boundary in the first place. Third, document absolutely everything. If I had not listened to my grandmother, if Adrian had not secured that digital forensics report, it would have been my word against 15 of my relatives. Facts do not care about family gaslighting. Facts win battles. And finally, protect your children's minds fiercely. The psychological safety of your child should always, without exception, override the feelings of an abusive grandparent or relative. If this story resonated with you, if you found strength in these lessons, or if you have ever had to draw a hard line in the sand with your own toxic relatives, I want to hear from you. What is the most powerful lesson you are taking away from my experience today? Share your thoughts down below. Or, if you simply agree that protecting your peace is the ultimate victory, just comment the word "good" down below. I want to see how many of you are standing strong out there. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to my story. Keep your boundaries strong, protect the people who actually show up for you, and never apologize for building a life that feels safe. Stay strong, and I will see you in the next one.